Ladies and gentlemen, boys and ghouls, fiends of all ages, welcome back to that show that doesn't lack with I, your host, Attic Ass. Welcome. If you can hear me over the incredibly loud cicadas and that guy, his lawnmower, we are in Berwyn, Illinois today, at the site of a residence once occupied by a certain Mr. Frank Nitti. This is 3205 Clinton Avenue. It's actually 3201 South Clinton that goes to 3205 in Berwyn, Illinois, where in March of 1930, one Frank Nitti, who was the successor to Al Capone in the Al Capone crime empire, lived here. Frank Nitti lived here from March 1930 until Halloween night of that same year when he was arrested by the federal government. He actually resided up on the third floor, right up there. How do I know this? This building was the subject of many news articles when Nitti was arrested here after an extensive stakeout on the part of the federal government. There were many newspaper articles written about it at the time that still survive, but I was tipped off by a certain alert viewer. Shout out to a longtime friend of this show, Chucky Barsick, aka Werewolf of Berwyn, who himself was a resident here. He lived down here, right over here, back in the 1980s when I first met him, and tipped me off to this. I did some investigation and found that this had been documented not only by journalists, but by the History Channel, who featured this building on their series entitled Mobsters. Now, the federal government had been tipped off to Frank Nitti living here. He was incognito. He was the subject of a nationwide manhunt. Over 150,000 wanted posters were printed until they finally tracked him to this residence. They tried to lure him out many times, and one such luring attempt was made on the part of the feds using this fire hydrant. Of course, there's going to be a guy standing in front of it. And the original fire hydrant is still here. What they did was they pushed his car, which did not have locking brakes, in front of this hydrant and tried to alert him of the fact that he had to move his car. Well, he didn't actually come out to move the car. In fact, what he did was he sent his wife out, who was operating under an assumed name, and she moved the car. So that was not successful. So then what the federal government did was they sent secret agents, and Nitti was apparently unaware of this completely for months. He was living almost under self-imposed house arrest. And these federal agents set up surveillance in this church across the street, which is still here, in the tower, in the bell tower. And it's a really interesting looking church tower. that is almost identical to the way it appeared in October of 1930 when the Fed staked it out. This is it. And they were right up in there. You can see the slanted slats that really make it easy for somebody to be up in there without being seen. They spent 2 cold nights up there, and it got so cold, as it sometimes does. October in Chicago, Berwyn is a suburb of Chicago. It is west of the city and south. It is adjacent to Cicero, which also has a very heavy mafia history dating back to the days of Al Capone. But unfortunately, a lot of the locations there are now gone, including the Alton Hotel, which I wanted to visit, as they've tried to sever their ties with that. But getting back to Berwyn, though, it is very cold at that time of year, really straight up winter at times. And they had to vacate the tower before finally apprehending Nitti, who was in that building kitty corner. And again, he was right up there. Those 3 windows were his residence. After his arrest, he spent time in jail before eventually getting released somewhat early, and upon which time he resumed control of his criminal empire. Nice gloomy day today to film that. We are exactly 8 miles from the Chicago city limits, so Nitti was really not that far away. Despite this nationwide manhunt, he really didn't go very far from Chicago to elude the feds, which lasted for months, from March all the way until October. This building was struck by lightning in 2002. It has been restored. You can see the roof is pretty much exactly the way it was. It has almost like a medieval turret type roof, and it really looks the same as it did back then. I know about the lightning strike too from Chucky Barsick, so shout out to Chucky Barsick for alerting me to this location and for being a resident there himself. I also want to shout out to a few other viewers of this show. Another longtime friend of the show, Mr. Jim Watson. Thank you for correctly identifying the catalpa tree. In a previous broadcast, I had wondered about the origins of the locally known Indian cigar tree. It turns out that it's actually a catalpa tree, which are native to southern Illinois. Shout out to Jim Watson for deciphering that. And then in the broadcast in which I revisit a epic party house, I was wondering about the name of a now extinct video store, which 2 viewers, not only Chucky Barsick, but also an unnamed co-worker of Eric Olson's, correctly identified Blonde Video in Riverside, Illinois. So shout out to you guys for that. Really old knowledge. We're talking late 80s here is when it went out of business. So Blonde Video. My next thing will be to try to hunt down photos. If I ever come across any, I will share them with you, the viewers. On behalf of all the cicadas that are infesting these trees, and on behalf of the ghost of Frank Nitti, which supposedly haunts this location, there has been reports of a trench-coated ghost wearing a fedora occupying this residence, which is supposedly the ghost of Frank Nitti. And that is, again, 3201 South Clinton. We are in fact on the corner of 32nd and Clinton. If any of you want to see the church and the building that Frank Nitti occupied. I know whenever I visit a cicada-infested area, I like to pair that noise with train sounds to get maximum acoustics. So until next time, I'm Anarchy Ass. Hope you enjoyed this trip down Chicago mob history. Next time, we'll be visiting a little surprise that I think you'll like. So, until then, don't go playing no t-ball.